I'm counting cards in Vegas, and in this video, I make some big mistakes that cost me thousands of dollars. I'll take you with me on my first 2 days as I get a feel for what counting in Vegas is really like. You also get to see how I recover from my mistakes while handling the stress of playing high-stakes blackjack.
Alright guys, our plan for today is very simple. We're just going to start on the south side of the strip, work our way up north. Hopefully we'll get some time in and hit some positive counts along the way.
When will you guys have more 3-2 blackjack tables open?
Only this one. Oh, there's more at 8 o'clock.
8 o'clock?
Yeah.
It was only 2:30 and I wasn't just gonna sit around and wait. So I decided to scout a couple of the casinos, but again, their tables weren't open yet. At this point, I'd been walking around for at least an hour and I was worried that I wouldn't be able to find a game at all.
Alright guys, there's no luck so far in finding a game that's open. All the casinos seem to be closed at the moment. You gotta be very particular with the game you choose, and if there's no game, you just don't play.
I clearly started the day way too early and I was wasting a lot of energy.
Excuse me, do you guys have any more 3-2 blackjack tables open?
No, only one.
There's only one here?
And high limit's gonna be 8 o'clock.
High limit at 8?
Yeah.
Alright, thank you.
But go to shop MGM. First MGM.
MGM? Okay, perfect. Alright, thank you.
Again, I would have to wait until 8 p.m., but the pit boss recommended that I go to Park MGM. And so I was off. All I remember her saying was MGM, so I actually ended up going to MGM Grand. Anyways, this place was busy. I found what looked to be a playable $25 game, so I quickly sat down. Around 20 minutes in, I was dealt a blackjack on my $25 bet. A beautiful $30 payout. A $30 payout? On a blackjack? What I failed to realize was for the last 20 minutes, I was playing a 6-5 game. My very first session in Vegas, and I already made the biggest mistake any AP could make. I was so focused on finding a shoe game that I completely forgot to check what the blackjack payout was. Thankfully, I never raised my bet past $25, but I felt disgusted. By the way, we're going to estimate the total cost of all the mistakes I made, so stick around to the end. So after learning this lesson, I found a nearby blackjack table, confirmed that it was 3-2, so I sat down to play. An hour into this session, and I was up $8,000. So in hopes of avoiding a back off and keeping my identity hidden, I went to cash out and the cashier asked me, "Do you have a player's card with us?" I said no. "Well, then I'll need your ID. In general, but especially in Vegas, you don't want to show your ID if you don't have to." But in the heat of the moment, I didn't want to look strange and I handed it to her. Of course, she photocopied it. Now, knowing that I messed up, I immediately called my team manager. He told me that because I'd already played for an hour and because I'd won so much, odds were that my game was already being analyzed and that I would be backed off if I were to ever return later. So I got a player's card and I asked the pit boss if I could get rated for the hour-long session I just had. And good thing I stayed, because after 5.5 hours of raw, unmasked card counting, a back off never came. I would have kept playing through the night to maximize my hours, but at the start of the day, I wasted so much energy just walking around for no reason. And if I were to have kept playing, I probably could have generated thousands more in EV. So starting the day too early was a bigger mistake than I initially thought.
Alright, so I'm done for the day. I just got home and I counted all the money. Turns out we're down $3,912. It's not as bad as I expected. I think we went on like a $11,000 downswing because I was up $7,000 at one point and I just lost all of it straight down in the last few hours of that session. But yeah, they just let us play forever. I only played at this one place, so we got a lot more to explore tomorrow on the strip. And hopefully we'll get as many hours as we did today. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Good morning, good morning. The plan for today, yesterday we got a lot of time in at this one casino. Let's see if we can recreate it. We're gonna go there. If we get kicked out, then we're gonna continue up the strip as we did yesterday.
So I arrived at MGM Grand later in the afternoon this time. Both tables are pretty busy, so I chose to back count the table with fewer players. Pretty quickly the count rose and I took a seat and I handed over my ID. Right away, the phone began to ring and I got about 10 minutes of playing time before the back off came. In only 20 minutes at MGM Grand, I'd lost another $1,000. My next stop was another MGM property, Park MGM. Once I arrived, I quickly found their game and I sat down to play, expecting a pretty quick back off, but 15 minutes went by. And then an hour went by, and then 4 hours went by, and still no back off. It was great that they were letting me play, but this session did not go the way I wanted it to. Here were some notable hands that I played. In this first hand, I bet 2 spots of $600 and was dealt a 10 and a 17 against the dealer's ace. My insurance bet lost, but at least the dealer didn't have a blackjack, so I bought in for more to double down. I got a 9 for 19, which was decent, and I stood on my 17. The dealer flipped a 2 and drew a nasty 7 to make 20, which beat both of our hands. In this next hand, I had a 16 and an 11 against the dealer's face card. I stood on the 16 and bought in again to double down. Of course, I just had to draw an ace to make the 12, and the dealer flipped a 7 for 17, losing us both of our hands. These next 5 hands happened back to back, and I'm telling you now, it was not fun. A few minutes later, I had $500 out and pulled a 16 against the dealer's 5. The dealer couldn't be bothered to bust and instead flipped a 3 and a 10 to make 18. We lost that hand, but the count went up, so I bought in to fund my next $800 bet. Here I was dealt a 15, which sucks, but there's still hope as the dealer had a 6. So I stood and the dealer flipped over a face card, making 16. All we needed was a 6 or higher, and the dealer flipped a 5 for 21. So I bought in once again and put down a $1,100 bet. I was dealt a 12 against the dealer's 9, so I hit to make 13, and then again for 17, and I stood. Of course, the dealer flipped a face card and things are just not going. I bought in again for $1,000 because the count was still high. And lo and behold, a blackjack. Finally. I kept my bet out for the next hand and I got a 15 against a 3. Again, not a great hand, but it was still likely enough that the dealer would bust. But no, I forgot the dealer actually can't bust, and he drew to 20. Now this is where a lot of people would question if card counting even works, but I knew that I had the advantage, so I put out another $1,000 bet. As expected, I drew a 12 against the dealer's face card, I had to hit, got 16, and then stood. The dealer ruthlessly flipped a 9 for 19 to show us who's boss just one last time. As you saw, I basically lost all but one of my larger bets. Some of the smaller bets won, which helped to soften the blow, but man. At this point, the pit seemed pretty comfortable with me, despite my bets moving like crazy, and soon enough, it was time for a shift change. The staff said their goodbyes to one another as the new shift rolled in. I was now completely surrounded by staff who were unfamiliar with me. Of course, they started hawking my table, making phone calls, and within just 30 minutes of this shift change, I was backed off. I ended up getting just over 4 hours in and generated $2,000 in EV, but this session I lost $3,000. EV is a metric that card counters use to measure the value of a game on average after thousands of hours of play. So even though any given session could swing up or down, us card counters focus simply on getting the hours in to reach that long run.
So I just got back off from the second casino. I lasted a lot longer than I thought I would. I got about 4 hours in. Swung down like 7K and then came back up. So there are no positives yet, guys. We're still in the negatives. But man, we got a lot of time in the last 2 days, more than I was expecting. I'm gonna go to Chick-fil-A. Always heard their chicken is good. Let's try it out.
So after I demolished the chicken burger, I walked a short way to the next casino on my list, Paris. The table was almost full, the minimum bet was high, and the rules just weren't all that great. So after playing for around 30 minutes and losing another $1,000, I left to look for a better opportunity.
So I played like 20 minutes, got pretty full, and I decided just to dip. Maybe they haven't fired me yet, so we'll see.
Little did I know that this decision would turn out to be yet another mistake. I went to another casino where I was immediately backed off. So I decided to go back to Paris and play their mediocre game. But when I returned, they refused to let me play blackjack. If I had just stayed at Paris, I would have avoided a ton of walking time and generated more EV. This was the moment I learned to simply take what Vegas offered me. With that, I decided to call it a night and head back to my hotel.
We made it home. We got beat even harder than we did yesterday. A lot of EV generated, but unfortunately we don't have the AV to show for. And it's really sad because I think this is the most time I'm gonna get all week, Usually it's gonna be 15 minutes, but the fact that I got so much time, especially in these one sessions at these one casinos, it could be a lot worse. I could be way further down. I could be $20,000, $30,000 down. Good night, guys.
Here are the stats for these 2 days. On day 1, I played for 6.5 hours and lost just around $4,000, but generated $4,000 in EV. On day 2, I played for around 5 hours and lost $5,125 and generated around $2,000 in EV. So on these first 2 days, I lost a combined total of $9,000, but generated around $6,000 in EV. To be clear, these losses were not a result of the mistakes I showcased in this video. The mistakes that I made ultimately reduced the number of hours that I was able to play, hurting my ability to generate EV. Let's see how much these mistakes cost. My first mistake was starting the day early. It didn't seem like a huge mistake, but for the first few days of my trip, I was recovering from a really bad cold, so my energy was limited. And I probably wouldn't have been backed off until a shift change or until surveillance figured it out. But if I were to estimate, I would guess somewhere around $1,500 of EV was lost from that mistake. My second mistake was playing the 6 to 5 table. I lost between 20 and 30 minutes of playtime, which cost me $300 in EV. As for giving ID on my first day in Vegas, I lost a ton of playtime that I would have gotten if I hadn't given my ID. I'm gonna estimate this as a $2,000 EV loss across the trip, but that's probably on the low end. Who knows how much more time I could have gotten if I hadn't given out my ID. My final mistake was leaving a playable table when I probably could have gotten another 20 to 30 minutes. I estimate this cost around $500 in EV and a whole lot of unnecessary walking. All these mistakes that I made on these first 2 days add up to $4,300 of EV I could have very easily generated if I hadn't made them. Now these are super general estimates and there's no telling whether or not I truly would have been able to play that much more. But what I do know is that these mistakes were easily preventable and there's no doubt that they hurt the trip overall. Anyways, please learn from my blunders. I've been Pinkman.